Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Drena Finds Out. And this week, I am joined by three lovely ladies. We have Miss Heather, we have Nakia Miller, and we have Tristan Odom. We're going to talk about the home buying process, how to get ready for the home buying process. So, and the importance of having people that are willing to go to bat for you and work together to get you to that end goal of owning a home. So, Heather, I know you recently purchased a home.
I did.
And you used Miss Nakia Miller as your realtor?
Yes, I did.
And you had Tristan as your lender. How important was it to have that team of people that are willing to network together, work together to get you to where you needed to be?
Extremely important. So, Nakia actually just represented me in my second purchase, which is a bit different because financing options change with being a primary residence or a second home, or currently owning a home. So it was important to me, one, to figure out what I needed in a home and what I needed in financing. And as someone who works in finance, I know, some of the ins and outs and deciding what was important before leaving the house.
Yes.
It did take us quite a while to find the home, but I knew that coming to closing was possible was my main objective.
Absolutely, as it should be when you represent a buyer. You want your buyer to come to the table with almost nothing because the cost of getting into a home, there are things that people don't even consider. I always tell people, think about, your appliances. Think about the cost to put blinds all the way around your home. So if you represent a buyer, when I represent buyers, the goal is for you to, zero cash to the table if possible. So that's when I have to call on my lender friends to make sure we can make that happen.
And one of your friends is Tristan.
It is.
And last week you did a Skype, not a Skype.
Yeah, we
but-
did like 2021, right? We're in the new year, we leave 2020 behind.
Right.
So we did a virtual seminar. Obviously, we're in the midst of a pandemic, and some people aren't comfortable coming out, in close proximity, but we're all kind of in there, right?
Good.
We're ready to have their temperature checked.
Right.
But yeah, I just feel like it was very important because one of the things that I see from a lender's perspective is that I come across so many borrowers who initially don't qualify for whatever that reason may be. They may just not be ready for some things that they didn't even foresee being a part of the home buying process. And so I thought it would be necessary. We're starting 2021 off. Why not go back and refocus? Let's revisit that goal of home ownership. What better time than now? It's the beginning of the season, and quite honestly, tax season is approaching, and a lot of people who are going to be privy to getting income, tax refunds, I think it's more beneficial to go ahead and take that money and invest it into yourself. And then, if you have children, get some sense of wealth with home ownership.
Right. I watched it just to try to refresh myself, but there's a lot of information out there. And I think that's the most important thing about what you ladies do, like that, being able to educate people on the ins and outs. Because for someone that's never bought a home, it can be kind of intimidating to walk in and not know anything. So I know, Heather, you said this is your second time buying, and we're looking at it from the perspective of someone who's never bought a home. Is there a right or wrong person to contact first when it comes between your realtor and your lender?
So there's not a right or wrong person to contact first. Certainly, as a realtor, I get calls all the time with people wanting to know about the process. So I educate them on the process, and if I'm contacted first, immediately, especially in today's seller market climate, I am going to get someone with a lender immediately. Me and Tristan are awesome, teams. We work together very, very well. So she's one of my top lender partners that I use. But what I mean by the market today in particular, we are in a seller's market. Houses are, on average, 3 to 5 days before being sold.
Yeah.
Or quicker.
There were times that I called Nakia,
Yeah.
and before she could make an appointment, and homes were listed that same day. One was under contract.
Right.
Not only that, but in this seller's market, you have a lot of sellers who aren't willing to bring closing costs, who aren't willing to pay a percentage. So I think that was very important to, as Heather spoke, and what Nakia said, allowing her to be able to keep as much money in her pocket as possible.
Right.
Because it's a seller market, it's so demanding. They're like, well, because I've seen several borrowers where the sellers are just not willing to do so. So They don't have to.
13 offers on a property.
Exactly.
Yes.
But for a first-time home buyer, somebody who is not savvy in this, process, I think it's very necessary for them to kind of understand that it's important to kind of put some money away.
Right.
You're investing in yourself. I mean, Heather and I would, do a lot of financial literacy just to kind of get people in the mindset of budgeting. Again, as we said, investing in yourself. So I think because of this present market today being seller-based, we need to start preparing, some of our finances, tucking it away, because you just never know. It's good to be able to come to the table with zero money down, but that is not always going to be the case.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, the two biggest things that build wealth is buying a house and education.
Definitely.
In our community, there's not always equal access to it. But underlying, it does go back to a bit of education. The financial education that Tristan and I would partner in Bancorp South. But thankfully, I had the professional education and knowledge that when I bought my first property, I knew it was a short-term property. I knew it wasn't my dream home, and I knew my objective was coming to the table as little as possible. But I also knew that I wanted that property to appreciate, meaning increase in value, and it did. Because I used the first-time home buyer program, even though I was not, I had a property within a certain amount of time. I was able to have my down payment covered. But then I was able to refinance, pay that out, get rid of my mortgage interest, lower my payment so I could be ready to purchase my next property.
Right.
Which, although I owned the property, I was able to find a product that fit me because my objective was lowest out of pocket, because I knew that then I needed to make repairs to the current property to then rent. So now I will have an income generating property that will eventually pay for the property.
Right. You always hear about grants, like there's possibly the new stimulus package, a new grant, like a $15,000 first-time home buyers grant. So so people that don't know, if they think, oh, this is my first time buying a house, I'm automatically getting $15,000. So they think they come in with that, and they come to you, and then like.
Yeah, I have a lot of borrowers who will contact me specifically because they want to have access to, I want to do the first-time home buyers program. I want to do, first-time home buyers grant. What do y'all have for first-time home buyers? But the reality of it is, each one of these grants or down payment assistance programs are income restricted. You have, and that is, categorized based on the county, in which you reside in, or city or state. So they're all income restricted. Typically, they don't want you to exceed about 80% of the area median income. So let's just say if we're talking about Harrison County, then you can't exceed $47,600 a year, typically. Now then we'll start tailoring off, okay, looking at how many people are in the household. Then you might get a little bit more compensation based on how many people you have in the household, and depending again on the program. Mississippi Home Corps has some really good programs, specifically they have an MRB7 that allows $7,000. So that is a really good one if you don't exceed about $60,900 and you have about 2 people in your household. And again, it tailors up. So based on the county, but you have to be a first-time home buyer. When we're talking about first-time home buyer, that means you haven't owned a home in the last 3 years. So some people have the misconceptions of thinking, well, I owned a home 10 years ago or before Katrina, and so I don't qualify. You qualify. As long as you haven't owned a home in 3 years, you're not a first-time home buyer. And if you meet all of the other stipulations, you can, in fact, take advantage of those programs that are out there.
So when you said that about investing in yourself as far as like saving money and everything, I think a lot of times when people want to look at price of stuff, and they want to think about, well, this if I go over here, this is cheaper, or this rate is cheaper. But to me, I kind of think it's more important that you have a relationship one, and then able to have someone that's willing to educate you. So I'm willing to invest more in that than keeping the money in my pocket. Because I have somebody that's gonna let me know, hey, you can do this, you qualify for this. Those things to me are more important. I mean, do you have a lot of people who are just about getting that cheapest price, or?
Yeah, you do have. I don't see it too often with first-time home buyers. I don't really, because again, they're not as savvy sometimes, and that's not to say
the rate
anything.
is the biggest thing.
Right.
Not getting into the nitty-gritty with fees,
Right.
but the rate, as a buyer, it was important to me to go into a bank that was going to completely service my loan. Meaning that if the loan is sold, I'm always going to make my payments to Bank Forsyth. If I have an issue, I'm always going to walk in the door of Bank Forsyth. Whereas some banks, they sell your loan and you write your check to someone else before that loan even closes. So, and I know personally people who have gotten lost in the shuffle where they write a check to ABC Mortgage, but ABC Mortgage has already sold it to DEF, and the payment's going to the wrong place, and they're getting a late fee.
And they can't get somebody on the phone. They don't have, the convenience of being at a local institution like Bank Forsyth, where, like Heather said, you can call me up, you can walk into one of our branches, you can make your payments, whatever happens. So we service the loans. So that is the key difference, I think.
Absolutely.
That's one of my biggest priorities as far as finding a bank, because a lot of times the loan products are the same from bank to bank.
Absolutely.
But the person you deal with is not going to be the same. Can I get them on the phone? Are they going to answer my questions in totality? I need basis for what you're telling me.
I want to add this about rates right now, coming from a real estate perspective. I get people all the time that says, they'll tell me my max is 175. Okay, 175, and I have to kind of reverse that. And so in dealing with any professional, because you're looking for an expert here. In dealing with any expert, I have to kind of get into the mind of my buyer, and what does that 175 mean to you? So I always ask, what do you want to pay monthly? You're telling me you want 175 over 30 years, but what do you want to pay monthly? And I start to kind of qualify them, and so it's $1,000 a month in mortgage, insurance, and taxes. Is that something? Oh yeah, I'm paying $1,300 where I am now. Well, come to find out, that's a $2,000 home in today's interest rates. So when I purchased my home 6 years ago at the best interest rate at that time, 4%, I thought it'll never be this low. Today's 2.5s, 2.75s, you get $40,000, $50,000 more house, but you have to be able to rely on an expert. So as I listen to these ladies go through the whole process, especially for a first-time home buyer, it can be overwhelming. That's why you have to be able to rely on an expert to give you the knowledge, information, and education that you need to get through this process successfully. So it's working in your benefit.
Because yes, interest rate does matter, but let's be very clear, there are several different factors that go into that interest rate. You're not going to have Nakia and I can have the exact same credit score. Our profile may be different, or let's just say it's all the same. But let's say I'm buying a $100,000 house and Nakia wants to buy a $300,000 house. Well, she's probably going to have more value in her home. It's probably going to be a lot newer, maybe. It may be renovated. There's just so many different factors that go into that interest rate, and it is not.
Are you putting money down?
Are you putting money down? You know what I'm saying? Like, how much value is in that home? It's not just I want the best interest rate because I feel I have the better credit score.
So, in your line of work, I'll ask both of y'all, what's the biggest misconception that people in the public area have about realtors?
It's not necessarily about realtors maybe, but about the process. A lot of buyers don't know that you don't pay me. All right, so if you're at home on, whatever search engine, and you're like, I kind of want to buy a house, but I'm not budgeted on how much does it cost for a realtor. The seller is going to pay me through your transaction.
Yes.
For the most part, my service to a buyer is free, so you can take that anxiety off the table. So that would be one. And then another misconception, I think that's really the biggest. Just that, that people are hesitant because they think they can't afford it right away.
Yeah.
And well, you know what? And another would be, I come across a lot of people who think that they are not ready. I just say, I think that I'm not ready. But once you begin that discussion, I get people all the time who are a lot closer to where they need to be than they think. A lot of people will be buyer ready, or a lot of people will be a step away. That's where we can rely on each other as professionals. Hey, Tristan, could you take a look at this? And it'll sometimes be as simple as if they do A, B, and C, they'll be buyer ready in X amount of time. But people tend to shy away. There's that discomfort because they don't.
Yeah. People are afraid of rejection.
Absolutely.
No one wants to hear a no.
Right.
But it's not a no. It's a not right now.
Not right
If
now.
you're dealing with
Right.
the right lender, it's a not right now.
Right.
So what's the biggest misconception about lending? Heather, you can chime in as well.
I'll give you one and I'll give you a buyer misconception.
About lending.
How about I have a credit score?
I was about to say, the fact that if you have, I'll even throw it out and say 800 credit score. You say you got 800 credit score, so then that borrower then thinks they have the ultimate level of buying power, and that is not the case. You have this 800 credit score, but how much debt do you have behind that credit score? Student loans, student loans, student loans. And, a lot of borrowers have up to $400,000 student loans. If you're going up in degrees, you want your doctorate, that's beautiful. However, being in school and you're in school deferment means I'm going to, as the lender, assess a payment against your balances. So thinking that, well, because I have my student loans in deferment or I'm in forbearance, I don't have to pay anything. Well, no, the lender's going to calculate that into. So that's probably the biggest one besides the credit score is the student loans, because I have seen it so many times go from a potential approval to an ultimate denial because the way that it affects your debt to income ratio. Now there are ways around student loans if you have what's called an income-based repayment plan. Depending on where your income falls, you may very well to get that payment plan set at 0. If you qualify for a conventional program or maybe VA or USDA, then we may be in fact be able to use that specific payment plan that is in place versus using maybe, 1% or 0.5%, which again can be detrimental to the overall approval process.
Let me quantify, because I don't think we said I am a previous mortgage lender, still licensed and still work for a financial institution. Same person. So on the financial side, I think the biggest misconception is that you have a lot of time. Your pre-qualification is based on your credit report, which essentially expires. Once you sign that contract, you're under a time period to move expediently to get documents to your lender. So if you are hesitant or not ready to do the time-based work, that can very much affect your buying process, because in a seller's market, they have a backup offer. They may not want to extend that contract from 45 days because you drug your feet. Now, if it's a systematic issue, more times than not, they're willing to. But if you did not do the work and you caused the delay yourself as a buyer, they don't have to extend. Once you're out of that contract, you're out of that contract. But as a buyer, I believe the biggest real estate misconception is that anything you do is permanent. It is not. It is temporary. My first property I bought with Nakia was a townhouse. That was based on my circumstances. It was perfect for my situation. We grew out of that rapidly. Rapidly.
Right.
But I also knew that I had options. And my option was to dispose of that property or sale or rent, which I have decided to rent. And if that doesn't work and it becomes cumbersome and I don't want to deal with the tenant or whatever, I can sell that property. It is a prime investment property. But I also bought that property knowing that it was a prime investment property. So my second house is, okay, well this is maybe a little more long term, but I'm thinking let's do this every 4 years, Nakia. Let's do this every 4 years. Next one is custom dream home. But nothing that you do in real estate is permanent. You can sell, rent.
And I want to add to that too, because I can say over the years, you follow what's around you, what you've been taught, how you grow up. So me as a child, when I looked at homeownership, I thought that when you bought this house, this is where you're going to be for 30 years. That's not the market.
That's
that we live
typically
in.
what our parents did.
Exactly. So that's not the market that we're in now, and those aren't the buyers that we see. Even when I was purchasing my house 6 years ago, I was thinking, what if I take a job in the week? I don't want to be tied down to a house.
Right.
There is no reason. As quick as she bought the house the other day, I can turn around and sell it for you. Right? So I see that that's something that's changed certainly over the years. You don't have to be tied down. The market is moving so quickly. It is a seller's market. You can sell it in a week.
And then also just to kind of keep into the misconception is like we kind of talked about where your credit score may be one thing, but then you have your debt to income. So a lot of borrowers feel as though, well, I make a certain amount, so I should be able to afford a certain amount. But back to what Nakia was saying, okay, well, how comfortable are you with those mortgage payments? And not understanding that you may be looking at, you want a $200,000 house, you may be looking at a $2,000 mortgage versus, I don't know, $1,000 in rent, $900 in rent, or feeling like if I buy a house, that's going to be cheaper than what it was renting. But essentially it's not. Because think outside the payment itself. Think about the maintenance and the upkeep of your home. This is your home. Exactly.
You can't call bills.
You can't call, right? Ain't no handyman on speed dial for you to call and say, hey, look, my air conditioning going out. You are now solely responsible for that. So
That's why having experts throughout the process to keep things in line for you is so important.
there's so many misconceptions.
We
We could do a segment specifically on misconceptions.
So as a buyer, financial professional / single parent buying a house, we went from house with a garage to townhouse. It was stressful for buying because I was trying to think about all the situations. I want to get married, I want more kids, I want this and I want that, and I'm thinking about this dream home, which ideally, financially, I can do, but is that what I want to do? So I was thinking about all these things, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, but it came down to what are my current circumstances? What am I going to be comfortable with? Because I know that I can trade up, which is essentially what I decided to do.
So, we talked about the misconceptions. I'll ask one more thing. What's the most surprising thing about your job? Like, what surprises you the most?
I would say the amount of individuals that I've come across who look like each one of us, but who are in a much older age bracket, who are buying their homes for the very first time. We're talking 50, 60, and to me, it's very heartwarming to be able to do that and assist them, because that tells you right there that the mindset, there's always been this kind of preconceived notion that, being in the minority demographic, we won't qualify, or we're not able to, obtain that home ownership and realize that American dream. So that is probably the most surprising thing I've seen. So many people have waited so long, and for whatever reason, they now feel inspired, they're empowered to go ahead and say, listen, I want to have something. I want to have some sense of ownership, something that belongs to me, something to build wealth, something to leave behind. But that is the most surprising thing that I've seen in the minority demographic.
What about you?
I totally agree. For me, I've been surprised every day. So surprising in the sense that the process is the same, but every single family, every single individual, every single person that's going to get those keys is totally different.
There's more transactions.
It's totally different, right? So just different things that I navigate and I see and I learn from people. But the most rewarding is getting somebody to the finish line. Who thought that they couldn't, back to what Tristan was saying, who thought that they couldn't do it.
You have anything to add about surprises?
Sure. So professionally, the surprise would be, first, I'm more of a community-based relationship type position now, and going out in the community and understanding the level of financial education that has been passed down. In some ways, we've insulated our families. I struggle, so I don't want my kids to struggle, but then you also don't give them the knowledge, one, of the struggle, and two, how to finagle that, what that looks like on paper, how to keep track of your finances and dig yourself out of those situations. So I don't want to say lack, but the deficit in financial education that happens in the home. That happens in the home from a professional side. From a buyer side, the surprise is that I can own 2 homes. I mean, that was never something that I intended to do. It's something that happened. I'm glad that I have the opportunity. If things work out right, I have some generational wealth in my son can come back and live in a paid for property when he's out of school. Hopefully he goes off and does great things. And if it brings him back here, that's fine. But I have something put to the side that is just for him. And I did it by myself.
Yeah,
And that's big.
that is. I love it. I'm so happy y'all came to talk to me today.
Absolutely.
We have all this melanin magic.
I know.
Thank y'all for, how can people contact y'all? How can they reach y'all?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Tristan Odom CDL, or Tristan Odom. You can also go to bancorpsouth.com/Tristan Odom, and if you were to get into home ownership, you can apply there. Or Tristan.Odom@bxs.com.
So you can find me on Facebook, Nakia Miller. You can find me at Bush Realty Group. You can find me at 504-813-7885.
I want to ask you about this 504 number.
Since the 99 and the 2000.
You know,
That's my baby.
right. I can tell.
The accent, I can pick it up a little bit. Well, thank y'all ladies for coming and talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we help some people. So
I
yeah.
think we did.
Or at least inspired.
Right. That's very inspiring. All right. Thank you.